Okay, so here we are in the beginning of the second meditation. So let me just again read and explain what is going on here. Basically, up to this point, then, he has hypothesized the malicious demon as the source of doubt when it comes to really kind of beliefs that seem necessary, right? Like 2 plus 3 is 5. It's really hard to doubt that, right? It seems like 2 plus 3 is necessarily 5. It has to be 5. Again, he had said that these are harder to doubt, and so he needed something stronger than just a dream doubt, just pretending like he's asleep and dreaming. He needed something better than that, and that's how he came up with the malicious demon. Um, so, let me just begin reading here. Meditation 2, concerning the nature of the human mind, that it is better known than the body. Okay, so he says yesterday's meditation, and notice again the meditation there meaning thought, right? Something along the stuff that he was thinking about yesterday. Yesterday's meditation has thrown me into such doubts that I can no longer ignore them, yet I fail to see how they are to be resolved. It is as I'm getting a little feedback. I think I'm gonna have to mute. Make sure that you're on mute. Sure way. If you're not on mute, please put yourself on mute. I think you get feedback when the computer when the computer speakers come on. Yesterday's meditation has thrown me into such doubts that I can no longer ignore them, yet I fail to see how they are to be resolved. It is as if I had suddenly fallen into a deep whirlpool. I am so tossed about that I can neither touch bottom with my foot nor swim up to the top. Nevertheless, I will work my way up and will once again attempt the same path I entered upon yesterday. I will accomplish this by putting aside everything that admits of the least doubt, as if I had discovered it to be completely false. I will stay on this course until I know something certain, or if nothing else, until I at least know for certain that nothing is certain. Archimedes sought but one firm and immovable point in order to move the entire earth from one place to another. Just so, great things are to be hoped for if I succeed in finding just one thing, however slight, that is certain and unshaken. Okay, this part here is very important. Remember, we had actually talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the first meditation, that he is looking for something that is certain, right? Something that cannot be doubted. And the word that was used here was indubitable, right? Not being able to be doubted. He's basically repeating that here, that he wants to find at least one thing that is certain. And remember what he had said in the first meditation. He had said that he wanted to do that because he wanted to basically use that as a foundation, right, for more knowledge. Remember, he wants to tear down the knowledge that he had in the past, but he does want to kind of start a new foundation and then a kind of a new structure. Remember, knowledge was kind of compared to a structure, to a kind of building. And so he's basically just repeating that here, except here we get something interesting that we hadn't seen before. He says, Archimedes sought by one firm and immovable point in order to move the entire earth from one place to another. What he's referring to there is an ancient Greek mathematician, Archimedes. And Archimedes is the one that invented the screw. He was an inventor, he was a mathematician, and he also did a lot of work in conic sections. One of the things that, since he was an inventor, he also invented kind of things that are, I guess we would consider them like in engineering or physics nowadays. He invented this idea of a fulcrum. And basically the principle is, so if you on a seesaw, right, you can have two kids on a seesaw, and the fulcrum is the midpoint where one can on both ends, one can push the other one up and down, right? Well, that idea is very powerful. Basically, the principle is that the longer the rod that you use, the more weight you can pull up. So if I have a really long rod, there's a kind of a direct proportion between the length of the rod and the weight that you can pull up. The longer the rod, the heavier the weight. And so, technically speaking, you can lift up a building, you can lift up cars if your fulcrum is long, if your rod is long enough, and you have the capacity to do it. But basically, it doesn't. The point is, it doesn't take a lot of strength on the other end to do that lifting, and that's because there's something about this. There's some kind of property in physics and engineering that allows for such weights, heavy weights, to be lifted. And so, one of the quotes that is attributed to Archimedes is that he said if he had this is how he felt sure of his principle, which is it is a true principle, that if he had a rod long enough, he could actually lift up the whole earth. It is a principle, and it relies on this idea of the fulcrum, that being the middle point, right in the middle of the rod. So what Descartes is doing here is he's comparing that midpoint, that kind of stable midpoint, which allows, in that case, it allowed Archimedes to lift this heavy thing. Descartes is comparing that to finding something certain, and basically that implies that when he does find that certain thing, whatever that is, that certain principle or statement, that he's basically going to be able to accomplish a lot with it philosophically, right? Philosophically, he's going to be able to accomplish a lot with that thing that is certain. Okay, so that's what that means. That's what that whole Archimedes mention of Archimedes here means. It's basically an analogy or a comparison to what he thinks he can do. That is Descartes. What Descartes thinks he can do if he finds something certain. Okay, so let me continue. Therefore, I suppose that everything I see is false. I believe that none of what my deceitful memory represents ever existed. I have no senses whatever. Body, shape, extension, movement, and place are all chimeras. But then will be true. What then will be true? Perhaps just a single fact that nothing is certain. Notice he says body, shape, extension, and movement. Those are the mathematical aspects that I was referring to earlier of our experiences. We for example, bodies, we experience things as bodies, as substances. We experience them as shapes, as mathematical shapes. Extension meaning that they're extended in space, and I think that's something like mass. And then they move, right? And place is somewhere in space. So basically what he's referring to here is that all of these things are illusions, and all of these things that he mentions here, body, shape, extension, movement, and place, are illusions because of the malicious demon. So body, shape, extension, and movement are not subject to sense perception. He's not talking about these being beliefs due to the senses. Those are more mathematical ideas, which by now, remember, he thinks he has been able to doubt those on the basis of the malicious demon argument. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue then. And then he says perhaps the single fact that nothing is certain. So it is certain that nothing is certain. He's kind of sounding a little paradoxical there, right? It is certain that nothing is certain, but he doesn't really develop that any further. I don't know. It might even be a joke. He might be just making a joke there. Okay, let me continue. But how do I know there is not something else over and above all those things that I have just reviewed, concerning which there is not even the slightest occasion for doubt? Is there not some God, or by whatever name I might call him, who instills these very thoughts in me? But why would I think that, since I myself could perhaps be the author of these thoughts? Am I then not at least something? But I have already denied that I have any senses and any body. Still I hesitate from what follows from this. Am I so tied to a body, to the senses, that I cannot exist without them? but I have persuaded myself that there's absolutely nothing. Okay, so let me continue here. He's leading up to something here by asking, am I not then at least something? Isn't there? Doesn't there have to be something? If I have no body, no extension, right? No movement. Okay, so let me move to, I guess this would be page 64. Let me just make sure I'm on the right path here. He says, but I have persuaded myself that there is absolutely nothing, and that continues over here. Absolutely nothing in the world. Okay, nothing in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies. So again, remember, he thinks he has persuaded himself of this, and he thinks he's done it because of, well, first of all, because of the dream that argument, but more importantly, by this point, because of the malicious demon argument, right? No earth, no minds, no bodies. Is it then the case that I too do not exist? But doubtless I did exist if I persuaded myself of something. But there is some deceiver or other who is supremely powerful and supremely sly, and who is always deliberately deceiving me. Then too there is no doubt that I exist, if he is deceiving me. Okay, this is a very important step here and a very important move. So what he's getting at here, and what he's just basically said is, if I persuaded myself that that nothing from the senses is real, I'm not sensing anything, I'm not smelling anything, I'm not seeing anything because I'm dreaming, and then if I've also persuaded myself that there is no extension, there is no mass, there is no number, there is no movement, there is no body, I don't have a body, there are no other bodies, well then this kind of thinking raises the question, well, what is there, right? What is left? If I'm successful in doubting all these things, then what is left? And so the question then naturally arises here, is it then the case that I too do not exist? And so that's a good question, right? Well then, if nothing is out there, if there's no extension, there's no body, there's no movement, what makes me think that I exist, right? What makes me think that I'm a thing? But then he says, but doubtless I did exist if I persuaded myself of something. That's a very key move there. Basically, the logic here is, okay, well, if I'm persuading myself of something, then there's something there that is being persuaded, right? And there has to be, it logically necessarily follows that there has to be something there that is being persuaded, right? If I'm persuading myself of something. Okay, let me continue reading. This will become a little bit clearer with some of the other things he says here. But there is some deceiver or other who is supremely powerful and supremely sly, and who is always deliberately deceiving me. So there he's referring to the malicious demon, right? Which he had kind of built as a hypothesis, right? And let him do his best at deception. He will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I shall think that I am something. Thus, after everything has been most carefully weighed, it must finally be established that this pronouncement, I am, I exist, is necessarily true every time I utter it, or conceive it in my mind. Okay, so here we reach the point that he wanted to reach. This is the thing that is certain. Basically, that I am, that I exist. And so, how did he get there? Okay, well, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's just go over it one more time. Well, basically, remember, he said that the doubt has led him to the point where where it seems like nothing exists, right? No body, no extension, no beliefs due to the senses. Well, then the question is, well, what makes me think that I'm here? And the answer to that question, the logically necessary answer to that question is, well, there is something that has to have these thoughts. And that something is I, right? Because I'm the one having those thoughts. So therefore I exist. So this has been interpreted as a logical argument, and it's a good thing we talked about logical arguments last time, because it has been interpreted as a logical argument. And even though that's controversial, we'll talk about that in a bit. The important thing here is that this all leads him to the what seems to be the conclusion, the logical conclusion, that there has to be something there that is having those thoughts about, the malicious demon, about there being no body, no extension. And what is that thing? Well, that's I, right? I am, I exist. That means that there is an I, and that I exist. And it seems like as if at this point there is no way of getting around that, right? That I has to be there. Okay, so I will go ahead and stop here.